Mr. Nixon's devotion to the principles of socialism as extended through the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare has now reached $80 billion. That's somewhere near 10 billions of dollars more than we are now dispensing for national defense. In a superb analysis of health, education, and welfare in our scoreboard issue of American Opinion, Dr. Susan Huck makes the observation, based upon very careful analysis which is present in that issue, that sometime in 1960, someone, if we know who, we'd know who the insiders are, set down the rise for the growth in expenditures for HEW at 27.5% annually and extended it. That's how you start at nothing and or start with the Eisenhower base and go to 80 billions of dollars, and it's soon to shoot right off the graph. I wonder, Dr. Huck, if you'd take a few minutes and comment on what's happening in HEW and specifically on this 27.5% rise.
Ever since I wrote that, I've been praying that my arithmetic was right. No, the basic data is correct. As a matter of fact, I walked into HEW's budget office, and I appear to have hit a slow day. It was full of, perfectly ordinary-looking young men who didn't seem to have a single thing in the world to do. They were all sitting there waiting for something exciting to happen, like a telephone to ring or something. And they were quite pleased to see me, and they gave me a copy, handwritten, of the entire budget of HEW, well, of course, abbreviated, since 1954. It was a very remarkable windfall, I thought. It was broken down into, maybe a dozen or so categories. Of course, you can break it down a lot more than that. But as far as having the totals and subtotals from 1954 to the present, I thought, well, since I've got all this information right from the horse's mouth, I happen to be a sort of graphic-minded person. You know, I was a cartographer in an earlier life. So I thought, well, I'll put it on a graph, and maybe I can make some sense out of that. And of course, if you put it on a simple graph, well, you just don't have enough spaces, you know, really. So I got some semi-log paper, which it doesn't make the actual rise of expenditure look as horrible as a straight graph does, but it does give you a straight line on a semi-log graph is a constant rate of change, either up or down. Of course, in the case of HEW, guess which way it goes. Well, I made the remarkable discovery that from 1954 to the present, there really seemed to be just two basic straight lines, and there were only two significant deviations from these beautiful, right-on-the-button straight lines in rate of growth. And the first one occurred actually in the second year of the existence of HEW, which was 1955, fiscal 55, when the budget shot from the original, I think it was 5.4 billion. Of course, if it's 80 billion now, you see there's been a little bit of a change. It went from about 5.4 billion to 7.6 billion in 1955. Well, then, in 56, it remained precisely the same, 7.6 billion, which is just sort of unheard of, because the routine thing, of course, is that every single agency, bureau, and everything else just clamors for more money, and they always claim they just barely scraped by last year, you know, when actually they were frantically buying rooms full of typewriters to get rid of the money. I was 1 year as a civil servant, and oh my Lord, I worked for an agency which literally did buy rooms full of electric typewriters to get rid of their appropriation so they could come pleading poverty. But anyway, for the budget not to increase from 55 to 56, and then from 56 on through the rest of the Eisenhower years, follow a straight line which, if you projected it back, came right back to 1954. Well, I suppose it sounds confusing, but if you get the scoreboard issue, Scott was at great pains to reproduce this graph, so maybe you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it seemed as though somebody had just drawn a line on the sort of paper that I was using, and that line represented the constant increase in the HEW budget. And then about 1960 or 61, there was just a slight little bump and they went off on a slightly lower rate of increase line. Now remember, this is about 60 or 61, and we've been through a number of presidents since then, and yet the only deviation from that line is a sort of a sag during the Kennedy years, when Kennedy was having a lot of trouble with Congress, and he simply wasn't delivering on this sort of preordained budget increase. They had already cut back Social Security to allow them to spend money on Medicare and Medicaid, and then that didn't get through Congress. And so they had a sort of a sag in the graph. And then when Johnson got in there and started twisting arms, he got the budget back on this line, and that's precisely where it's been. President Nixon has delivered right on the button every year he's been in there. And so, as I said in the article, if we had any idea who draws these lines, we might have some idea of who's governing us. Because whoever puts a line on a graph in 1960 and has the spending in 1972, 1973, proposed spending, following that line, well, he's a little more powerful than the president or Congress or the people you imagine are ruling you. Well, I don't know whether I should say anything about the other humorous things I found, but I think humorous in a macabre way was looking into the Office of Child Development and discovering their fantastic forms, a 16-page form to be filled out on toddlers, 3- and 4-year-old children, because this is recommended for administration of daycare centers. Now, what in the world can you write about a child of 3 or 4? Well, you sort of have to see this form to believe it. And they ask for details of how the child takes a nap. Well, first of all, does the child take a nap? Well, okay, fine. Now, does he take a long time to go to sleep or a short time? And does he talk before he goes to sleep? Well, does he take a toy or a book to sleep? List the toy or the book. Does he have a little accident while he's taking a nap? What does he do if he has a little accident? It's incredible stuff. And I don't know what enthusiast put all this together, but it seemed to me that this form included everything you could possibly even consider asking about a child, a very small child. And then I happened to think that they have these wonderful things in computers, and I imagined them putting this all in the National Data Center somewhere, and rooting it all out when they want something.
So somewhere ages and ages hence, Big Brother reaches into the computer and discovers that you carried a rag doll to bed at age 2.
Well, they've got you.
Thank you, Susan.